Cool. Hi, I'm Paul. I wanted to be with you guys today, but I can't. I'm out at a conference. So Jakes has asked me to record a video and just cover some topics for you. There's a lot on my heart, but let's try and get as much into 10 minutes as we can. I want to do sound engineering and songwriting as the two areas in South African worship ministry that could do with some improvement, I think. So sound engineers talking to you, and band leaders talking to you. Sound engineer is as much a member of the team as anybody else. They are the last expression of what we're doing. They are the mouthpiece of your music. They are very much the sound visionary of where you're going. So if your sound guy is not participating in your worship meetings, in your worship socials, if your sound guy doesn't know what your set list is, you know, that kind of thing. If your sound guy is not actually being treated as part of your worship team, that's not a good thing. So that's all I really have to say about that. Sound guys, Jake's asked for a couple of silver bullets, okay? So some of you may already know this stuff. To others it might be brand new, and to some it might be terrifying. But next time I see you guys, we can go through it in detail. So as far as the sound desk is concerned, know your system, and don't expect that because you took it out of the box that it's going to work properly. Make sure that you've got your speaker gain staging set up. You don't want your speakers running full tilt all the time. You don't want your faders down at like minus 20 dB. You want your system running at a good acoustic level. If you're not sure what that is, you probably need to have somebody come in with a measurement mic and set it up for you. Or you need to play a reference CD that you're used to, and you need to set the levels and the character of the sound system to the room. No sound system out of the box works properly, so make sure that you've set up your sound system for the room. As for channels and tracking, you want to equalize everything. Okay, there's no such thing as a perfect input. High pass filters, silver bullet number one. Make sure you've got a high pass filter on everything except kick drum and the bass guitar. Piano sometimes, synth sometimes, but mostly you want to keep low frequencies out. Even voices, all that bumping up against the mic and what have you adds to the sound and creates noise. It also creates opportunities for feedback. Make sure that you know your band. So your band are going to say things to you that you need to interpret and turn into sound engineering information. Your guitarists will say things like, my bottom end is feeling loose, which is a bit awkward. Your vocalists will say things like, I'm sounding nasal, or I'm sounding sharp. Now, those aren't possible things. They're hearing that in their monitor, and what they're probably referring to is a frequency range. So get a frequency range chart. Know that if something is sounding loose, it's probably because somewhere around 250 hertz, there's too much of that frequency. It's causing a resonance, a looseness. With vocalists, sharpness is usually somewhere between 1K and 5K. You know, it's different for the sound system, it's different for the engineer, but know your system so that the people on stage, basically, a good monitor mix is a monitor mix that you can't hear. If everybody's happy and nobody's asking for this to be turned up, that to be turned down, you've done a good job. Volume is not the solution. When you're doing monitor mixes, if somebody's constantly asking for more of themselves, either their EQ is wrong, so they're not sticking out in the monitor mix, or everything else in their monitor is too loud. As with EQ, cut, don't raise. When you're equalizing, you cut frequencies, you don't raise frequencies. You don't want to add new information, you want to remove bad information. So make sure your monitors are mixed quieter rather than louder. And sound guys, walk around the room, see where the sweet spots are, walk up on the stage, listen to the monitors. If the monitors are too loud, it's your fault, not the musician's fault. That is your ministry, that's your stewardship. Fix things at the source. So we don't fix things in the mix. What that means is, if you're hearing the electric guitar too harshly, or it's too heavy, or it's too sharp, or whatever it is, too nasal, go and shift the mic position at the source. You don't EQ that. Once your high pass filter is in place and once your sound system is tuned for the room, you fix it at the source. You may have the wrong microphone on. You might have the microphone on axis instead of off axis. You might have it too close to the center of the cone instead of the edge of the cone, things like that. Mic technique. Most vocalist issues are actually caused by themselves. Proximity effect, 3 fingers away from the mic. If they're not singing 3 fingers away from the mic, you're going to get a lot of proximity effect, which is accentuation of the lower frequencies. You can fix it at the desk, but what happens then when they step away from the mic? All of the bottom end falls out. The basic features you need to have included in every channel. You need to have a compressor on every channel. You need to have a gate on every channel. You need to have a high pass filter, whether engaged or not, on every channel. You need 2 kinds of reverb on every channel. A short reverb, less than a second, and a long reverb, above a second, maximum 3-4 seconds. And you blend those to create ambience and to create room. 3 silver bullets. Number 1, high pass filters on everything except the low frequency content that is meant to be there, like kick drum and bass guitar. Number 2, gain staging. Make sure that your system is set for the room, that everything is running nicely at unity gain, that your speakers aren't full blast. Don't waste headroom. Don't waste headroom on your desk either. And silver bullet number 3, only cut, don't raise. When you're equalizing, you cut frequencies, you don't raise frequencies. When you need to correct a monitor mix, you cut volume levels, you don't raise volume levels. That creates feedback and a rat's nest of problems for you. Cool, so songwriting is really close to my heart. I've written a lot of songs. I've written songs for other people, I've written songs for myself, I've written songs for bands that I've led. And I think the most difficult part about songwriting is everybody wants to know the recipe, the secret formula to songwriting. And I wanted to know that. And I didn't want to listen to people when they said, there's no secret recipe, there's no formula, it's different for everybody. But it is, and here's why. Some of us have a bias to write melodies. That's what we do well. We can write a melody line. We can't even put words to it, but we can hum out a melody line. Some of us are brilliant with chordal work and harmony work. We can compose a set of chords on a piano that just sound magnificent, but we can't write a melody line. We have people who are rhythmic, who can really take a boring 4 on the floor, 1, 4, 5, 6 chord progression and turn it into something that gets people moving. That's all part of songwriting. Sure, it's bandmanship and it's other things, but ultimately you want your song to turn into something more musical than a poem with a melody line stitched on top of it. So I would say the first thing you have to do is write a lot of songs. Okay, there are no such things as short songs and no such things as long songs. I've written over 120 songs since I started. Of those 120 songs, there are probably 12 that I'm proud of, that I've published. The other 100 odd songs are still sitting in my moleskins. I have 2 moleskins. One of them is absolutely full. One of them is absolutely full of songs, chock-a-block. And they will never see the light of day, and maybe my kids will inherit them one day. Write 120 songs knowing that you're going to get 12 out. Don't stop. 5-word sentence that's profound is a song.
Hello?
Cool. Okay, so I've got Dale behind the camera there, and he's helping me out with this so I don't lose my train of thought. If you want to write a song and you want a framework to dress it on, you always need a framework. You need something to hang the walls on. Contemporary music and worship music does hinge off basic rules. Break the rules, but they are basic rules. Verse, chorus, pre-chorus, bridge, known as a middle 8. Use these things. Hang your song off these things. Start with a chorus. Why do we start with a chorus? Because when you're writing a song, most often you'll find that you have a concept. So let's take a line. He will reign forever and ever. Let's say that's the concept. That's what I want to write a song about. So because I'm not a melody writer, I might stick something, he will reign forever and ever. I'll just stick that on top of a chord progression, 1, 4, and 5 of the key. So if you're in C major, that's C, F, and G. And I'll use those 3 major chords to pin that melody line on top of. And then you use your verses to describe the concept. So the concept is he will reign forever and ever. So be a journalist. Be a journalist about your own song. Why will he reign forever and ever? First line of the first verse. He is king above all things. Now I've started describing the chorus line. Once you've written your verses that describe the story, you might find that you need to refresh the listener's mind, and that's what a bridge is for. Lyrically, the purpose of a bridge is to remind people what they're singing. So now we know you are king forever and ever. You are king above all things. Now, once you've been going through that cycle for a couple of minutes as a singer, to prevent disengaging, you want to use the bridge to remind people. Now, there's a trick in songwriting chord-wise. You go to the relative minor, which is the 6th chord. So let's say we're in C major now. If I move to A minor and write my bridge on top of A minor, it shifts my mind just away from the major key long enough to refresh my interest. It's renewed interest. Then I can remind people in that bridge lyrically what they're singing about. And they think they've shifted key, but they haven't, because it's a relative minor. That A minor still belongs to the key. Then you can bring them back into a chorus or back to a verse. While we're talking about that, if you're writing a song, you get linear songs that are a story progression where your first verse speaks of something that shouldn't be repeated. Like, it sets up the song in a way that if you went back to the first verse, you'd almost be recreating the story. Then you get non-linear songwriting, where each verse can stand by itself, and actually you can bounce between verses. You can switch them out as you please. So the framework, I would say, pick a time signature, 3/4 or 4/4. Your lyric will probably determine that. Pick a key. You'll have a key that you like to sing in. I like to sing in G major or D major and their relative minors. And then write your chorus first. With or without a melody, write your chorus first. Let your verses describe the chorus. And if the song becomes dull, after a while, let's say it's a 5-minute song, use your bridge to refresh and renew interest, and then go back into the chorus line. Okay, so Dale's asked a flippin' good question. What do you do with writer's block? I went through writer's block for an entire year, proper writer's block, where I didn't have the solution yet. So I actually didn't write anything for a year. Not a lick, not a riff, not a chord progression, not a lyric. I was empty. But I broke it by writing about writer's block. And not in that way. I didn't go and write a song about, I've got writer's block. But you write about the vacuum. You'd be surprised how inspiring the blackness of space is, because it hangs the stars in it. Like, I mean, there's a song right there, but that's what you're talking about. You're talking about allowing the blackness to describe the stars. The emptiness of writer's block is actually massively inspirational. I think songs have actually been written from there. An example from a spiritual perspective, not from a songwriting perspective, is, was it Matt Redman's When the Music Fades? Eh? Yeah. So he had a purpose to that song. He wanted to still the congregation and renew the love for worship. But he wrote from that blackness, almost from that writer's block. He wrote from when the music fades and all has slipped away. Yeah. He wrote from that emptiness. Write about your barrenness. Some songs are for you. So worship is primarily for you. Then for the congregation, from an overflow. So if you find yourself writing songs that really dig deep into you and find out why you're disappointed with the Lord, why you're disappointed with life, why you're disappointed with death, why you're disappointed with poverty, write from those places. They may never get published, but they're adding to your well that you will write from. And fill yourself with musical influences. I think Graham's there with you today, and Graham will tell you all about this. You need a full well of musical influences. Please don't only listen to worship writers. Worship writers have a specific groove for a specific purpose. You better have Earth, Wind and Fire in your collection. You better have Foo Fighters in your collection. You better have Deadmau5 in your collection. You better have Skrillex in your collection. You better have Metallica in your collection. You better have Queen in your collection. You just better have a whole bunch of people in your library that you write from. And practice poetry. Read, write poems, write songs from your emptiness. Break writer's block. It's a topic. You can write about it. Dale's asked another fantastic question. Actually, I've just kind of scrapped the questions that I had ready to answer myself. It's much more better. It's much more interactive when somebody's asking the questions. So Dale says, how do you find your own voice? How do you find your own identity as a songwriter when there's so many influences? You see this a lot in commercial music. In commercial music, you pick somebody that you fall in love with. And there's a difference between being influenced and having an idol. If you're influenced by the way Jeremy Riddle writes music, if you're influenced by the way Taylor Swift writes music, that will come out in your music. But it's not to say that it's not part of your identity. How do we push those things back? How do you push back sounding like your influences or living into your influences, knowing that you're not being true to yourself? you have to know that you will never be a better Taylor Swift than Taylor Swift is, and you will never be a better Jeremy Riddle than Jeremy Riddle is. You can never be a better version of an authentic person who is being themselves. What does that mean? It means it takes longer for you to unpack your identity in worship, but it means that people will see that authenticity. Takes longer, but people will see the authenticity. You guys have been in worship moments where a worship musician has performed or relayed a worship moment flawlessly, absolutely perfectly, but the Spirit hasn't moved. You've seen people going bananas and dancing and having fun, but you know that the Spirit, the presence of God has not been ushered in by that. And then you've had some new kippie who drops a note now and again, misses a couple of chords, and actually doesn't sound fantastic, and the Holy Spirit falls like this. And that's it. That's what you're pursuing. I know this is not part of the I Am Second movement, but you have to consistently, continuously make yourself second to what the Holy Spirit is doing. You have to be second to what you are pursuing as a musical ambition. Your musical ambition can't be your identity. If you want to sound a particular way, you're going to get there, and then what's going to happen is you're going to have to defend and protect the straw man that you've constructed. You've constructed now this worship leader that doesn't actually exist inside you or outside of you, but everybody likes that, and now you've got to maintain that. Don't maintain a facade. Start slowly, go slowly, stay true to yourself, and where the Holy Spirit presences himself, that is what your worship identity is, and you'll grow in it. Don't be a copycat, man. You're an original. Okay. Co-writing. So here's a funny thing about postmodernism and the scripture that says each has turned to his or her own way. Postmodernism is a thought process that says I have enough access to information now that I can think my way into or out of any situation, that truth is relative. Truth is not relative. God is not relative. God is truth. God is a Trinity. If God depends on community to create, if the Father and the Son spoke to each other to create the universe, why wouldn't you collab? Why wouldn't you collaborate or co-write like God has created songwriting for community? Now what happens is our pride gets involved, our ego gets involved. You can ask Jakes, and you can probably ask Graham too. I don't like people touching my songs. I get really ratty if you touch my songs because I've worked on that. That's my baby. But you know what? If it wasn't for co-writers, my songs would never grow up. It actually takes parents to raise a song. You actually cannot raise a song by yourself. So co-write, and in the co-writing, you'll actually unlock songs that aren't even meant for you. You'll unlock songs that are meant to be sung by other worshippers. You are part of the conduit that unlocks a song for a vocalist who does not know how to write a song. Co-writing is so important. I would start right now. I would pick a partner in this room and I would say, hey man, I found a line. You will reign forever and ever. What do you think of it? Can you bolt something onto it? And then write your 120 songs, because you're not going to get it right the first time. But I would say, as a rule of thumb, there's no such thing as singular songwriting. Even if you write the song yourself and you present it to the band, they are going to write new hooks, new melodies, they're going to write new parts, and you've got to guard your heart. Because that song, if it's a true worship song, never belonged to you to start with. It's been entrusted to you. And you've been entrusted to lead and unpack that song. But it's not your intellect that wrote it. If it is your intellect that wrote it, maybe you should get into commercial music, which is fantastic. But songs that come from the Lord are divinely inspired and they don't belong to you. Don't be selfish. Share those songs and co-write a lot. Cool. Is that it?